So I guess I'm a music reviewer now because people keep asking me for my opinions on new albums when they come out, and I've gotten more used to talking about new albums that have come out, and I don't feel exactly the same way that The Needle Drop does about Kendrick Lamar's new album, so why the hell not talk about it? We're gonna discuss Damn! Now leading into this, I should give some history of myself with Kendrick Lamar. I am a huge fan of Good Kid, Mad City and of To Pimp a Butterfly. They're two of my favorite rap albums of all time, for sure. He also kind of got me into rap. Good Kid, Mad City was the first rap album I really got massively into. So those albums both, of course, are very long, conceptual, film-like experiences that are really meant to be taken in kind of all at once. And this has been the difficulty for me with kind of keeping up with those two albums over the years. Like, either of them is definitely a masterpiece in its own right. They have lots of thematic resonance and lots of just interesting things to say and great song structures and just, yeah, they're fucking fantastic albums. But they kind of, in the process of being such, almost move away from what I usually look for in music. Like, they almost feel more like watching a movie where there's something kind of taxing about it. You have to sort of set aside time for it. And not to say that I don't listen to any Kendrick Lamar songs casually. I would say that both those albums have plenty of great shufflecore songs, as I like to call them. Like, you know, you can throw on Backseat Freestyle any time of day and you're gonna have a good time, or Swimming Pools, any of the singles really from either album. And both of them have some of my favorite songs of all time. But, like, the experience of listening to the entire album, I feel like, is kind of attention, like, you need to pay full attention to it. It's not something you can just have on casually in the background that you could listen to on repeat all day long, which is how I usually listen to a new album. When To Pimp a Butterfly came out, it actually took me a while to, like, listen to the whole thing more than once, because it was long and it was dense and detailed, and there are some songs that if you're not paying attention, you just kind of get lost and you're not sure what's going on anymore. You know, there's such a huge variety of styles and emotions across the album. Whereas, say, for an album that I recently have listened to a lot of times, even though I don't even really think it's all that amazing of an album, but I keep listening to the new Oliver Francis album, what the hell is it called? Chlorine. Just because it has one consistent vibe all the way through, and when I finish it, I want to keep feeling that vibe. I don't want to switch to something else. I'm, like, in the mood for that, so I just keep putting it on over and over again. And none of Kendrick's other albums have had that effect on me, really. Maybe Good Kid, Mad City to a greater extent than To Pimp a Butterfly. So going into Damn, this album was kind of exactly what I expected it to be based on the hype cycle of the last 2 years. Because when To Pimp a Butterfly came out, this was like Kendrick somehow managing to one-up himself in terms of having a massively conceptual album, a massively cinematic album. You know, Good Kid, Mad City was already one of the most cinematic rap albums ever made, and he managed to top it. And so I couldn't help but think, well, surely he's not going to try to do this again. Like, who would try to follow up an album that was like the most critically acclaimed album in the fucking genre of the last decade, this huge experimental, thoughtful thing, and then try to, like, duplicate that success? Like, people are inevitably going to compare it to the previous album no matter what he does. So if I had been in the same position, my instinct would be to now make something more normal, to try and, like, deflate that expectation in the future that every album I make is going to be this gigantic, you know, huge experimental piece, and to do that as fast as possible. And so when Untitled Unmastered came out, I really felt like that was kind of a signal that, like, hey, not every Kendrick Lamar project is going to be a 3-year wait and a giant concept piece. You know, I can still put out music just on the fly or whenever, you know. And then just a year later, we get hit with Damn. You could tell from the fucking title and cover alone that this is, you know, it's just a picture of Kendrick and just, like, basically MS Paint written the word damn on the cover. And to me, I was like, well, this is obviously going to be his, like, commercial album, his bangers album, or just his not a gigantic, huge, peace album. And that's fine. In terms of score, like if I was to rate this out of 10, I'd give it the same thing that Anthony Fantano did, strong 7, but not for the same reasons, because it doesn't bother me that this album's not hugely conceptual or that it's not necessarily as big or consistent as the other two. I actually think I'll probably listen to this one more. Like, I'll be more likely to repeat it again and again and again. I've been listening to it nonstop since it came out. Like, I've probably heard it a good 25, 30 times by now. It's very easy to listen to over and over again just because the songs are more straightforward. There's a lot less weird experimental bits or stuff that really commands your attention. It doesn't violently change tones as much as the previous album did. So yeah, you can actually throw this on and have it in the background. Now, give me a second. What I do think about this one, why I don't rate it higher than I do, is that I don't think any song on here is incredible. There's not a single song on here that's as good as All Right, or King Kunta, or For Free, or You, or possibly even I from the previous album. There's nothing on here that's as good as Swimming Pools, or Bitch Don't Kill My Vibe, or Backseat Freestyle, or yeah, like, there's nothing on here, in spite of these being the more straightforward, streamlined songs, none of them are as good as Kendrick's previous big, explosive pop songs, because what carried those was kind of that it married a concept with the idea of a more like, straight out banger of a song. And those songs were very multifaceted. They had like lots of moving parts to them. There was usually some big changes over the course of them, and they kind of were really conceptual for, radio music. Whereas this album, the big, like, front-running banger is Humble, which is a really fun song. I love it, but it is verse, chorus, chorus. It's just a very standard song structure. It's just a cool beat and Kendrick rapping and a fun hook. But it doesn't have anything on, like, Backseat Freestyle, where you've got the shouting at the beginning, this monstrous, hilarious hook, this insane fucking beat, and then the huge change up where Kendrick's like losing his breath in the middle of the verse at the end, just going apeshit on this final verse. There's just so much more going on in that song than there is in a song like Humble. And I feel like Humble is kind of indicative of this album. Most of these songs are kind of short. You've got tracks like DNA and XXX, which bang hard as shit. They are these loud, abrasive, fun, cool songs, but they're just kind of over in the blink of an eye. Whereas, like, XXX to me feels like a smaller, more watered down version of Mad City, which is one of my favorite Kendrick Lamar songs, period, if not my outright favorite. And that song, went through all these different phases and different vocal inflections and weird shit. The part where he's like, if I told you that I killed a nigga at 16, would you believe me? Perceive me to be innocent Kendrick you've seen in the streets. And like, it's panning left and right. Phenomenal stuff, lots of interesting imagery and shit in the song, even though that song has probably the worst guest verse on the whole album, where the guest rapper, just, I don't even know who it is, he says the word hood like 8 times in a row in the first verse. It just keeps rhyming with the same word. In spite of that, still an incredible song, and it's just got such a huge sense of drama and all the sound effects going on. So even though this album does have songs that are like in that same vein and spirit, they just don't live up to the previous songs. But listening to the album on the whole, it's also just kind of a fun time, and I don't dislike any of the songs. There were some songs on To Pimp a Butterfly that I just would never listen to outside the context of the whole album, like Mama or Hood Politics, and I'm sure some of these songs other people really like, but to me, like, this is not something that's gonna come on in my car and I'm gonna like not skip it, or that I just throw on because I feel like hearing it in the way that I would with, like, a song like All Right or something. Whereas this new album, I do feel that like every song, none of it's like, oh god, this one, except for maybe Loyalty. And I only feel that way because I think that song's too long for what it is. Everyone kept saying like all the impressions I've seen about this album always describe Loyalty as like the pop song, like the radio friendly, because it's got Rihanna, you know, so it seems like, oh, this is supposed to be the big hit. Nothing about the song feels like a hit to me, though. Like, the hook's not that memorable. The weird-ass sampled 24 Karat Magic in the background that sounds like a talkbox guitar that's running through the whole song just gets tiring. It just kind of doesn't have enough bite to it to really be attention-grabbing in the way that a pop song would be. Yeah, I don't know, it's kind of a weird track. It's kind of the least memorable song on the album, where you can easily imagine why Humble would be a big pop song, or Love would be a good pop song, you know? But that one, I feel like, and my biggest problem with it is that it falls in kind of a lull part of the album, where they put several of these slower songs back to back, and like, you get through Loyalty, and it's just kind of like, and then you get into Pride, which is like the same kind of tempo, that same kind of dreamy, laid-back tone, but is a much more interesting song. It's just got a lot more going on. So it kind of leads you to feel like that whole part of the album is just kind of slow, and then it just wakes you up with Humble, where, you know, you're in this long, dreamy state, and then all of a sudden, boom, boom, nobody been for me, boom, boom, it been no different me, boom, boom, well, boom, boom, yeah, yeah, boom, boom, I remember, you know, you just start going ape shit. I always, like, have to turn up my volume, like, as high as I can once Humble comes on. It's like, I like, max it out for DNA, then you turn it down for Ya, and then you turn it back up when Humble comes on. It's a weird system you have to employ to listen to this album. So, okay, just to get into it track by track and what I think's interesting about it, I think this album's kind of has a strength and a weakness in the fact that it is conceptual, because I was kind of surprised that it has a concept at all. I really expected this to just be the Kendrick Lamar does a bunch of fun songs album, and it kind of is, and you can really see it in the way that we've got the final track, Duckworth, which is very much like this origin story and kind of a statement of purpose about Kendrick Lamar's life and rapping to some extent. Like, he's saying, like, this is how we came to this point, that we can write these songs just about, like, you know, about whatever, and just be this big famous rapper guy. And a lot of the songs are meditations on where he's come as a result of the previous two albums, you know, like what life he's living now as this best-selling, critically acclaimed recording artist. And it just feels way more personal than the previous albums. It's not really about all these wacky characters and stuff. There was this great video that came out recently called Kendrick Lamar Subverting Identity that goes and analyzes the idea that Kendrick Lamar has never really had one set persona for himself. He's mostly been playing characters and how he switches between them. I don't know how much I agree with the idea that he didn't have a set persona, because, like, there are definitely songs that seem like they were from his perspective on the previous albums, but I do think that this album is clearly deviating from that. This album is about Kendrick Lamar, who he is, and, like, what he's about and what he's going through. For the most part, you know, there's only a few parts where he steps outside himself and plays a character, and it's usually a character that's kind of interacting with him, like in the song Fear, where it's his mom telling him all this shit that he's gonna fear her for. So the other place you see it is in the lack of features. The only features on this album are Rihanna, who does like a little bit of rapping and mostly singing. You've got a U2 feature that's very brief and it's just singing a couple lines. And you've got the Zakari feature on Love, which is all singing and sort of atmospheric. So whereas on like on To Pimp a Butterfly, you had tons of features, some songs with like 3 fucking features in them, and just like all these different perspectives, all these speaking on all these different topics. This one's just Kendrick fucking blasting through verses on song after song. And even when he didn't have features before, like there were so many songs where he was doing something so high concept that he wasn't really just rapping. Like, if you think about King Kunta, like the whole first half of the song, he's just doing this weird, like, shouting every couple of bars thing. Like, he's not really straight up rapping until the chorus and later in the song when he breaks out, like, the actual verse. It's more about this funky groove that goes through the whole thing. you know, if you think about certain songs from that album where it's just like, it's more about this vibe that the song's giving off, or about him embodying a character and not really speaking for himself. But on Damn, it's just like non-stop chain of Kendrick doing rap verses. And I feel like maybe he felt he did have to prove something with that, where, like, we know that he can do the big concept album, but can Kendrick Lamar just be a great rapper like any other great rapper? You know, can he just put out an album that stands on the strengths of him having a good voice, him having good bars? Like, some of the criticisms I see of Kendrick are that he does all these goofy voices and characters because he just doesn't have a good enough voice as a rapper. And I think this album proves that wrong. You know, even though he has this kind of nasally high register voice, you listen to fucking DNA and he's just spitting hot fire over the whole track, and you're just like, yeah, it's fucking intense. It's as hard as any other rapper would ever sound. So, you know, I think that maybe he was trying to prove that he could do the rap album. He could do a straight up spitting bars across a whole album, you know, regular track lengths, regular fun kind of songs, and it would still work, and people would love it, and it would probably sell. And I couldn't help but suspect that maybe he was trying to make his first platinum selling, or I don't know if his first platinum, but his first best-selling album, because he's never had a #1 hit, I think. I don't know if it's just albums or if it's albums or just songs, but I don't think he's ever had a #1 hit, which is part of the argument for why he couldn't be the greatest of all time in the Hip Hop DX video on whether or not he could be the GOAT, that he just doesn't sell well enough. He doesn't have the you know, pure name recognition to be the GOAT yet. And when I heard Humble, I couldn't help but think, this is supposed to be an earworm. This is supposed to be a song that gets played all the time on the radio and makes you, you know, need to buy it on iTunes. And I really wonder if that's what he was going for here. It's like an easier to listen to album. And I have seen a lot of people who think this is their favorite. Kendrick Lamar retweeted a picture of a text he got from his mom where she was saying it was her favorite one yet, you know? Because it is, again, just like an album you can just throw on and groove to. But that's also where I think that the concept can be a bit of a weakness, because it does have somewhat of a concept, and on the one hand, it strengthens the album in that there's lots of these fun little things that like kind of come in and out. You know, I like all the random drops. I love the fucking "No Kung Fu Kenny" and another world premiere. That shit's hilarious. You know, the "Ain't Nobody Praying For Me" refrain that comes up through the album. Like, there is stuff that strings it together so it feels kind of cohesive, and that's nice. I like when my albums feel like they're intended to be albums. It doesn't just feel like a collection of random songs. There is some intentionality to it, so it still works as an album, even if it is more of a fun time. But then on the other hand, because the concept isn't really delivered on all that strongly, it kind of comes off as weak in places where you've got some songs that are like really saying something about the subject matter, and then others where it felt like he wanted to have a song called that on the album and it didn't really go all in on conceptualizing it. Which the two songs that get criticized the most from this are "Love" and "God." I personally like both of those songs, but I do think they are weak conceptually. Like, neither one is an interesting statement on the subject, and both have really weird lyrics that seem largely meaningless, or at least overly cryptic, and some odd delivery on Kendrick's part. And I really feel like both of them, like, more sonically try to capture the feeling of the subject. Like, "Love" sounds like a love song, and "God" sounds like a big audacious Kanye West song, so like I get that, but I just don't think they delivered on the concept super well. And sometimes it just feels like some of the songs I have to wonder, like, what does this have to do with the general overall concept of the album? To go through track by track, I think that "Blood" is a cool little intro, though I will probably skip over it most of the time if I'm putting on the album, to be honest, because you can pretty cleanly do that. And I just always want to get to "DNA", because "DNA" is a huge fucking banger. It's got that "give me some ganja," which is like 70% of every thought I've had over the last week. Gimme, 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 gimme some ganja! And the bass just goes fucking insane. Kendrick's just going as fast as possible. It's awesome. Then you get to, Yeah, which is a pretty big change of pace from the end of DNA. But I like that song a lot because it has this kind of weird, ethereal, dreamy feeling to it. And I actually really like Kendrick singing on it, which I know Fantana wasn't that big on. But I like how it's got this kind of drifting back and forth, hazy feeling to it. When he's like, buzzing, radars is buzzing, yeah. It's like falling through a field of flowers, dreamily kind of feeling. You know, it's nice. It's pleasant. I like it. It is kind of a weird direction after DNA, but again, it's still kind of punchy and simple and fun. So I don't feel like it immediately pulls you out. Like, for me, the moment that To Pimp a Butterfly always gets weird is when we get into, like, These Walls, and it's just 5 minutes of this very different atmosphere from the previous song. And so it totally changes the mood, you know, and then the next song totally changes the mood, and these songs are long, and they really go through a lot of things. With this album, you know, Yeah pulls you in another direction, but it's punchy, it's quick, and it gets out. Then you get into Element, and it's a fun time, and he's got a, you know, hilarious chorus on it. Oh, the next song is Feel, which is honestly, like, see, this midsection of the album is where, because things kind of get into this slower pace, they kind of bleed together, and I always forget what exactly Feel sounds like, though it does have some lyrics I really appreciate on it. When he says, this must be how Pac felt, you can sense apocalypse happening, but nothing's awkward, something like that. You sense an apocalypse, but nothing's awkward. Like, that's such a weird, disturbing image. The idea that you know things are fucked, but no one else seems to notice, or just everything feels right, even though the apocalypse is coming. Like, yeah, kind of a disturbing and interesting image painted there. And then that goes into, again, Loyalty, which I already said some stuff about, and Pride. And, okay, I had to pause to go murder a massive insect, but I am back. So, what the hell was I talking about? I don't remember. I think I was on Pride. Pride is a cool song because I relate to a lot of Kendrick's feelings about, like, his fame and responsibilities that come with it, particularly on the song You from the previous album. I feel like he retouches on some of the stuff that he said in that album here, where he was kind of attacking himself for being self-righteous and for, like, claiming that he's all about trying to give back to the community and doing all this good stuff for people and, like, trying to be there, when on a moment-to-moment level he often isn't there, and where he, you know, he's more concerned about his own personal growth and making all this money and doing all this stuff than just, like, actually being there in the community and doing good in a direct way, as opposed to this indirect way of, you know, the obviously self-satisfying career of being a rap artist, which is something he's always wanted to do. So, you know, with this song, you've got that haunting refrain, maybe I wasn't there, and all these, like, sort of creepy, lilting sounds going on with this interesting instrumental. It's a cool song. I just wish it didn't come right after Loyalty, where it really puts us into this kind of lull that's suddenly woken up by Humble, and then all of a sudden it's banging and everybody's jumping around and shit, you know. It's an odd fit, but, you know, Humble's a fucking great song. And then we get into Lust, I think, next, which is a really interesting kind of creepy song that's about, that I think has, like, the most interesting message on there, which is just about being kind of addicted to routine and wanting, like, it's not necessarily just about sexual lust, though it has some fantastic sexual lyrics, like, just let me put the head in, I don't want more than that. Just, it's such a creepy way of describing sex and desire. and like just this need, like the lust is not born out of like a need for the sex itself, but just to like come down after a long day kind of thing, or just like to deal with the emotions of this everyday life that's kind of monotonous and takes you through these same cycles that you kind of become addicted to and you can't break yourself out of. And he's sort of criticizing himself for getting trapped in those cycles. Interesting song, and it's got this really weird backwards like sounds on the beat and stuff. This one almost gets into that realm of like difficult to listen to in passing, but I think it's just kind of cool and fun enough to make up for that. And then after that is Love, which has been a kind of contentious song on this album because it is totally different from everything else Kendrick's ever done. It's just like a straight up poppy love song. But what I like about it is that, I mean, it's also kind of a cloud rap, almost like a vapor trap song or something. Like, it sounds like something Blank Banshee would produce to me. It's got this very airy, calming, relaxing sound to it that I really dig. And I also like how the song has these peaks and valleys in it where they'll start layering Kendrick's voice on top of itself, and it kind of builds in intensity and then disperses into Zakari's very like high-pitched singing. I think the song has a great rhythm to it, and it's a fun listen. I don't think I Wanna Be With You was necessarily the best hook for the song, but I'm fine with the rest of it. It's kind of cute. It's kind of a cutesy song, which maybe isn't something you want from Kendrick Lamar, but hey, I think it's fine. And I don't think it's such a huge hard left from the rest of the album that it's like totally changes it. But then we get to XXX, and that's where we have an impressive amount of things going on for a 3-minute song, where it really changes gears pretty heavily at several points, but all with just this hard, greasy, cynical edge to it, which I think Kendrick is great at. And this one's got like a kind of sarcastic bite to it, where he, goes on this rant about how he'd kill someone if they fucked with any of his family, and then gives a lecture on gun control, to a bunch of kids. And it's just like, there's this sense of broad cynicism towards the nature of America and his own feelings and stuff. And it's neat. And it's also kind of funny because it's him, like, at one point, rather than play a character, he responds to one. Like, he introduces a character who's telling him something, and then he, like, says, like, look, I'll be honest, and then, like, runs down what he would do in their position. So, yeah, it's a cool song, and it's got some phenomenal beats in it, with these crazy sirens and shit. Then we get to Fear, which is, like, basically the one big, long conceptual track on the album that very much feels like it came from the later half of Good Kid, Mad City. Like, this feels like a song along the lines of, the obvious comparison is Real, because it's got a similar kind of, like, very simple, repetitive beat that goes on forever while a bunch of different kinds of things happen over it, and voicemails are introduced into the track. It's got that same kind of vibe as the later tracks on there. But at the same time, and this, to come back once again to what I think is this album's biggest failing, because I do think this is a really cool song. I like the exploration of fear as a concept. I love the way he dives into just his fear of, like, losing everything, which is something I have constantly feared. It's that sensation, I think I've said this before, and maybe this is the difference between, like, old money and new money, is that when you've been at the bottom, you understand that you can always end up back there. Like, you don't have that sensation of safety. You don't have that sensation of, like, everything is definitely going to work out because it always has. Because if you've ever been bottomed out, then you know that you could be there again. And so, like, I have this same fear that Kendrick's explaining here, that, like, one day this will all evaporate, and I will not be remembered, or nobody will care, or I'll just get fucked over by somebody, or I'll fuck up so badly I lose everything, and so he's kind of describing that fear in this song, amongst others. But again, while this is a really interesting track, I don't think it's as good as Real or as Sing About Me, you know, like these heavily conceptual songs from before. So again, that's kind of my problem with this album, is that I don't think any of the songs are bad. I just think that none of them is as good as the same thing he's done before. It's just a matter of it being a fun, easy to listen to album. You've got God after that, which has been another really hotly contentious song. I think this is probably most people's least favorite. Personally, I think it's hilarious. Just the fucking hook. Flex on swole like, like, I mean, the song, there's laughter in the song. The aha is a big, obnoxious laugh. To me, it's not meant to be taken seriously. It's meant to be kind of a hilarious, over-the-top statement of this is what God feel like, you know? Like, it's very Kanye West in that way, you know? This is a God dream, as he said on Ultralight Beams, which that song was much more of an ostentatious, like, gospel song. This one feels almost ironic, and I think it is hilarious. And like, I told my brother Shade like that I liked the song, and he said, yeah, you've been listening to Lil Yachty lately. So and I was like, yeah, I guess this is a little bit like Lil Yachty. It is kind of like a big ignorant trap song in a way, but a feel good one, like what Yachty would do. It's just kind of a brag track, but one with a sense of humor, and I like that about it. And then, of course, Duckworth is like the most straight up telling an interesting story via rap verse song on the album. You know, it's kind of like almost traditional compared to the rest of it. It reminds me of when you get to the end of the Eulogy by Cakes to Killa, and it's like all these weird club and tribal beats and stuff, and then you finally get to the title track, the Eulogy, and it's just like a straight up fire fucking rap song, and you're almost like, I wish this was the whole album, you know, but at the same time, I like all the other stuff for being so different and out there. So yeah, that's kind of how Duckworth feels. But yeah, I mean, I think it's a solid album. It's fun. It's a good time. It's re-listenable. It's easy to put on. It kind of reminds me of a Run the Jewels album in a way, especially with all the songs that are like 3 minutes and there's a cool beat change up. Like, this album feels like take a cool beat, rap over it, which is like what most rap is, you know. Not most of it is not high concept shit like what Kendrick's used to. And granted, he's not making the best rap songs on here, you know. He none of this is maybe as good as the best Run the Jewels songs, for instance. But if I was listening to a Run the Jewels album and DNA or you know, Humble or XXX came on, it would feel right at home. Especially with those beat change-ups. Like, I could easily compare the gimme some ganja to run them jewels fast, run them jewels fast in terms of, like, the tone. So yeah, I think it's cool. I like it, but maybe not as much as the previous two albums, and that's fine. I think it's great that Kendrick's proving that he can just make albums frequently and they can still be good. He doesn't have to have a gigantic concept. He's not all about these characters. He's not all about the big opera stuff. He can just be a great rapper. And I think in the long run, that'll be a nice thing to have. Like, rather than getting a Kendrick album every 3 to 5 years and it's only when it's like an extremely high concept thing, like, I don't want Kendrick to end up being a guy who feels like he has to have the biggest thing in the world every time he releases an album, you know? If he can put out albums frequently and they can be great, that just means more great music, more fun Kendrick songs to have, you know, to have around and to listen to over and over again as time goes on. So I'm sure I'd like another high concept album, that'd be great, but, you know, I'm glad that he didn't feel like he was trapped with that. And I mean, maybe he even did to an extent just because he made this one conceptual, or maybe that's just the way he thinks. Maybe, you know, he wants his albums to be albums. Whatever the case may be, I'm happy with how this one came out. And that's it. See you in the next one.